Hey guys, Josh back with my first video in quite a long time, especially a poker-related video. Recently I've been trying to make a concerted effort to uh, make a bit more content. I really enjoy doing YouTube videos because I mean there's no paywall. I can sort of speak freely and format videos how I want to. Um, it can be a bit cumbersome to like script out long videos. So I think what I'll do is just sort of make shorter video formats and just briefly covering you know some some theoretical ideas. That's really what I love talking about when making content. So Um, I think this way I'll, be able to upload more frequently and the videos will be a bit more digestible and um, yeah, so today the the inspiration behind this video was just a hand that I played um, like a week or a week and a half ago or something. Basically how the hand went down was I opened the low jack, big blind defends, and the board is Jack 3 deuce, rainbow, it goes check bet call, turns a queen, and then I bet big, and then the river's an ace, so it runs out Jack 3 deuce, queen ace, flush draw on the turn, no flush on the river, and I jam for I don't remember how big the jam was, like two and a half or probably two and a half times pot, I think. Something like that. Um, anyhow, uh, what happens on the river when you go to think about bluff catching is pretty interesting. Um, so I have 10 3 deuce rainbow. The reason I'm using this board is because I only had 10 3 deuce rainbow for the early position configuration. But I'm going to start talking about this hand in Pio and the button versus big blind configuration. So I just ran 10 3 deuce in the same configuration, so we can just compare apples to apples. So in the button versus big blind configuration, pretty important to remember that both ranges are going to be significantly wider, and the value jams on the river are going to be pretty, well, relatively thin. Just because both players are going to have to defend significantly more hands on the river. Um, yeah, again, this is button versus big blind single raise pot. Um, in the later configuration, there's going to be a bit more, a tad more checking back, but on a board disconnected and dry, there's still going to be a good bit of betting. So I gave the sim 30% and I believe 80%. Oh, 30 and 70. Okay. Um, so yeah, another detail is that I bet on the bigger side on the flop. Hijack versus big blind on Jack 3 deuce. I just use like a 2/3 size. Um, and very occasionally a 1/3 size, but mostly just like 2/3 and check. Um, just given the earlier configuration. Um, but betting at a pretty high frequency on a board this dry and disconnected, especially early position versus big blinds, just because the like when I open from EP, I just min open, so the big blind's going to be very wide. So on a board this dry and disconnected, I'm going to be betting quite often. Um, so yeah, and then when you get to the later configurations, there's going to be a bit more checking back. Um, and yeah, like your polar bets are just going to be a bit more polar per se. Um, yeah, so bet on the bigger side. So this is 70% pot. Goes check, bet, call, and then the turn is a flush draw queen. So one thing to note is that when the turn's an overcard, you're generally not going to be using like a really big size on the turn. It definitely looks like a card that you'd be betting pretty big on. But generally the idea is that you want to be able to bet a bit thinner on a card where the button won't have a ton of the big blind's not going to have a ton of queen X is the idea, and you want to be able to comfortably bet turn and river with all of your queen X, and this just allows you to bet more often when you have this slightly smaller turn size. Now if the turn is like a jack, well, I don't know about a jack. I guess, yeah, you'd be betting a tad bigger. I think the idea just being, well, yeah, I think the big blind's gonna check call a bit more jack X that interacts with like the backdoor straight with the 10. So your turn bets are gonna be a bit more polar. But if you look at like yeah, so this is a good example, like on the 9. The idea is you're not going bet with a 9. So when you do bet, it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be more hands that have like hands that can get stacks in. Is really the idea. Um, there's a sliver of betting with like this weak 10x stuff, but if you're just using one size, it's going to be pretty polar, and it's just going to be like um, good 10x and overpairs and two pairs and things sets. So anyhow, turn was a flush draw queen, and then it goes check, bet, call, and then the river is an ace. So a few things happening on this river. The imposition player makes quite a few two pairs straights, good top pair, like ace king off, still making it into the small bet range on this river. But let's take a look at what's small betting, what's jamming. So the jam range, I mean, it's going to be pretty polar. It's going to be sets and like some strong two pair, like this ace queen ace 10 stuff. I think those hands mostly smaller betting. Yeah, those are mostly going into like the queen 10 size. But they're strong enough you can jam them because you've outdrawn a bunch of other two pair. Out of position, doing a lot of against the smaller turn c bet size. Out of positions, doing a lot of check raising on the turn, so they're not gonna have a lot of queen 10. But they'll have plenty of other two pair, queen 3, queen deuce, doing a lot of check calling on the turn. So yeah, so the jamming range is going to be a lot of queens, 10s, king jack, and then like some two pair. So when you're defending against the jam on the river, it makes sense to have cards like, since imposition is jamming a bunch of two pairs and sets, it's quite nice to have two cards that on unblock bluffs and simultaneously unblock value. Wait, did I say? I meant hands that block value, like you know, if you have a Broadway pair in your hand, you're blocking some value because imposition is always jamming sets, especially like queens and tens. And then like the button's gonna have all the bottom sets, like the threes and deuces. Um, and then they're gonna have a bunch of you know, like king jack off, king jack suited, for value. Straights mostly just jamming the river. I mean that's generally something that you'll see on these higher boards is, you know, on higher straight runouts. Imposition is just, you know, jamming for this really big size with straights, just because it's like a hand class they have an advantage in. Um, yeah, and then queens and tens doing a lot of jamming. So um, the bluffs on the river for imposition are going to be so important to know on this turn that's pretty good for imposition. Um, you know, out of position is going to be like check folding a lot of queen high stuff on the flop against this big size. Like all this stuff just check folding. Um, so imposition is going to be uh, betting quite a bit on this turn, and then the imposition player on these turns that are pretty good for their range, especially on higher turns where they can value bet pretty thin. Imposition is just gonna be using a lot of high low hands like this king high stuff, um, because if imposition bets big, like say they bet like this overbet size and then the river's a king, they can just check back and win against a queen. Whereas if you were like say out of position blind v blind, and you just had like some naked king high on the turn here, and you bet, and then you hit a king on the river, you still have to check and face a bet, and then your hand's going to be indifferent a lot of the time. So when you have like this naked king high stuff, with just like this naked overcard, you can just hit a shitty pair on the river and check back and win. So that's why imposition is liberated to use these trashy high low hands a lot as bluffs. Um, and then the Jack X stuff, making it in there occasionally as well. Just because they block straight draw continues, so blocks the king jack and quite a bit of 10x like the jack 10 off, and then um, queen jack off would be queen jack suited and queen jack off are going to be floating occasionally, so it blocks the queen x for out of position. Um, and then whenever the ace hits on the river, um, you know, a lot of these jack high, king high stuff is going to be. Oh, I need to select the smaller turn size. A lot of this jack high, king high stuff is going to be used as, oh, offsuit ace, as the bluff jam on the river. Um, so yeah, and then you'll notice like generally when you have a lower card in your hand, you want to be using that more often to bluff, because it unblocks more folds. Like if you have an 8 in your hand or a 9 in your hand, these hands aren't so great because it blocks something like, you know, 10-9 off. That's going to be check folding the river. Um, yeah, and not to mention like, well, you block jack 9 off, which is like the turned open ender. So you just want to have a lower card in your hand if you're gonna rip it in. So generally, you know, in this spot, having a king in your hand is slightly good because the jack x part of the imposition range is going to be used as a bluff, slightly more often. Yeah, so having a jack kind of bad, and then having a king slightly better, but still not good. But two pairs are just going to be like the snap calls on the river. And then like the queen three, queen deuce stuff. I mean, obviously just blocking so much value. And then, but one thing I wanted to point out is, like I said, the jack high stuff with a tad less showdown is going to be used as the river jam slightly more often than king high. So when you have like king deuce, it's kind of a nice hand with blockers to bottom set, and you unblock slightly more bluffs. But when you have the jack deuce, it's still close to break even. It's just you block slightly more bluffs. So yeah, that's sort of the idea. And since it's button versus big blind, imposition is going to have a lot more air available to bluff with. So you don't need to just bluff catch like really strong hands or relatively strong hands. Yeah, but you can get kind of creative with your river calls. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've covered that, I'm going to pull up the hijack versus big blind sim. Okay, so this is hijack versus big blind. You'll notice like a pretty good amount of betting on a board this disconnected. Like the imposition player is going to be doing quite well on a board like this. So then, yeah, this is a 3/4 size on the flop, which is like the predominant size. Check bet call. And notice facing this big size, since the hijack has relatively stronger high cards, out of position is not going to be floating nearly as often. Like notice this queen jack off is just pure check folding. And then the queen jack suited stuff not doing nearly as much raising. And the EV of a call just going way down with these high card floats. And remember, like, when we looked at that button versus big blind sim, like, the out of position player is, the out of position player is doing a lot more check calling with, like, this naked high card stuff. So it goes check bet call, and then, turns a queen, the queen of hearts, check, and then, yeah, like this card is so good for you. Like you can just bet so much on this card. So I'd recommend splitting. Like 50 and 150 is sort of my default here. Doesn't really matter the exact split, but you know, if you're gonna be betting very often, you generally want to be splitting in some way. We'll just use this 3/4 size on the turn here. And then notice like this queen 10 stuff doing a lot more check calling on the turn as opposed to button versus big blind. Just because this turn is so bad for the out of position player that they just want to have a lot more protection across rivers. Check back call and then river offsuit ace. And then in position, mostly just like the predominant size here is just ripping. And the small size is really just for ace queen. It's like the only queen X you can really value bet on the river here. So facing the jam, you'll notice something peculiar kind of happening here. So you'll notice that something like queen 10, yeah, like a bunch of these queen 10 off combos just check folding, like queen 10 of clubs just pure check folding. And then stuff like queen jack, and ace jack doing a good bit of calling. The reason this is happening is because when you have a jack in your hand, remember that the hijack RFI range is going to be significantly tighter. Um, they, they don't really have much Jack X to bluff on the river here. Like, Jack 9 is pretty much the only bluff with a jack in it. Whereas, button versus big blind, like, the button's gonna have like Jack 4 all the way down to like Jack 4 suited. They can rip it in on the river with. Um, so when you have a jack in your hand, you just like you block all these streets. And you don't really block a bluff because I mean besides Jack 9, but like the Jack X that imposition is jamming on the river is either King Jack, a bunch of King Jack, or just like this sliver of Jack 9 suited, which isn't even bluffing turn that often. Um, so having a jack is just really good, and then pretty much all the bluffs have to come from this King X region. Remember, we talked earlier about these high-low card hands getting into this turn range quite often. So on the river, the bluff jams are mostly just coming from this king high stuff. Because they block straights, and it's like stone bottom of range on a run out like this. Because a lot of the high card hands with the ace hit a pair on the river, so the bluffs are mainly just king X, and then if you have a jack in your hand, that's extremely good. Because I mean, again, because the only bluff is Jack 9, but also if they have a hand like Queen Jack or Ace Jack, these hands are pure checking back. Like these never make into the bluff range. It's just like some random Broadway pair with a Jack side card, but those are always checking back. So yeah, it's just really nice to have a jack in your hand. So you'll see like this Queen Jack off, Queen Jack suited stuff doing a lot of the calling, and then it's having a jack is so good that the out of position player would rather just pure call Queen Jack and then fold most of the Queen 10. Which is pretty interesting. Yeah. It's also nice. Like having a queen is also nice. Because the river jam, like queens are pretty much pure jamming the river. Whereas like top set is making it into the small size a decent bit. And yeah, queens just very high frequency, betting turn, and then pretty much pure jamming river. So a queen and a jack, both very good cards to have. Ace queen also a good bluff catcher, having a queen and unblocking all the bluffs. But then you also notice stuff like king queen, king 10. These sorts of hands are just pure check folding, because remember, like, the bluffs are just coming from the king X region. So yeah, long story short, when facing a hijack jam, their bluffs are just king X, and they can't really have much jack X to bluff with. So that's the moral of the story. I know this video is kind of long-winded, but just really wanted to get into the sort of intimate details there. Yeah, so I think I'll do one or two of these videos a week or something to try to get the ball rolling on the channel. But I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, drop me a subscription, and thanks again for watching.